Hello and welcome to another podcast on my channel. And some time ago, I did post a question on LinkedIn where I asked all of you supply chain professionals about which company's supply chain job interviews are you most interested in. And the two options I had given in that poll was Amazon and P&G. And almost there was an even response because about 46% of you did respond by asking for more details on the Amazon job interview for supply chain, and then about 44% were asking for P&G supply chain job interview Q&A. I've already made and posted the video on the P&G Q&A for supply chain, which you can watch by clicking over here. And today we will talk about Amazon. And in order to talk about that, I've invited someone who has been a long-time friend of mine and has worked at Amazon for many years. So I think he's one of the best people to talk about this particular topic. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Umair Feroz Awan. Hello, Umair. How are you?
Hi, Jamil. Thank you for inviting me over. Very happy to be here, and I hope I can help your audience in securing a good job at Amazon.
Absolutely, Umair. It's a pleasure to have you with your number of years of experience at a prestigious company like Amazon. I'm sure my viewers are going to take a lot of advantage from this video. So, Umair, first of all, tell us a little bit about your career journey. Where did you start, and then how did you end up in Amazon?
Yeah. So I started off as an automation engineer for Siemens back in Pakistan. And while I was serving as an automation engineer, I did my MBA. And then I thought like it would be better to move towards the CPG world. So I joined Procter and Gamble first in Pakistan, and then they moved me over to the US, and then moved me around in several cities in the US with different customer teams. So I got to work with wholesale channel, club channel, mass retailers, as well as discounters. After that, based on that experience, I landed a job with Amazon where I was managing a team of vendor managers. And it was a big break for me in the sense that I was able to change industries. I had never worked on the electronics market, but Amazon hired me to manage a team of vendor managers focused on home entertainment business, which includes TVs, Blu-rays, DVD, home theater, projectors, etc. And it was a different world for me because I was now, instead of being a seller, I was now working as a buyer for TVs like Samsung, Sony, LG, Apple, Epson, Canon, TCL, and all the associated brands. So I spent about 7.5 years doing that. And in doing so, I was able to transition again in my career. And that's one of the beauty of Amazon, which allows you to transfer your skills to another job and learn another skill there. So I was able to move over to the cloud side. And then I now my most recent job, I lead a team of product managers focused on software delivery. So a very different kind of supply chain.
Excellent. That's a fantastic career journey. And I think, Umair, if I'm not mistaken, you also moved geographies in this journey, right? So, one of the very interesting topics for viewers on my channel is how do you move from, let's say, India to the US or Pakistan to Canada and all of those kind of things. So, can you also talk to me a little bit about during this whole journey that you shared with us? When did you move to these different countries, and how much was your P&G experience and your Amazon experience helpful in making those transitions?
I think one of the core things was I was very flexible about it. Like I knew in my mind, like, hey, I want to make this career move, so I'll be very flexible. I had several options. Um, Initially Dubai, then Geneva, and then finally the one which worked out for me and my family was the Cincinnati one. And that happened in 2011. And after that, I spent about 4 years in Cincinnati, and then I got a job offer within P&G to move over to Minneapolis to do a role with target customer team. So I was able to move there. And then while I was at Minneapolis, Amazon came knocking, and they are based out of Seattle. So I moved to Seattle in January 2017, and since then Seattle has been my home thanks to some remote job culture progressing. We have made a lot of progress there. So I've been able to stick in Seattle for about 7 years now.
Excellent. Excellent. So I think that's a very good segue into my next question, Umair, which is about the hiring process at Amazon. Let me start by telling you what I know about the process, because that's something which is public information on your website. And
Mhm.
because a lot of my clients and my followers ask me this question, I know for a fact that Amazon, very similar to Procter and Gamble, when they are asking you questions in a job interview, they are asking you behavioral questions, which means that the traditional star model is kind of prevalent there. But tell us a little bit about the hiring process itself. How does it start? What are the different stages and so on?
Yeah. So the first and foremost, I would say like a resume customized to the job you're applying for is something you would need to start off with your Amazon hiring journey. So that's step one. Once your resume is cleared, and because the world has been adopting AI, so Amazon obviously is one of the forerunners of it. And there is a technique to how you build a resume, which passes through the AI systems and finally lands into the lap of a recruiter who actually reviews. And if it is good enough, they will invite you for additional process. The second process, you will get an invitation to take a online questionnaire, which is there is no right or wrong answer, but they are trying to see what your personality is and what kind of situations you thrive and what are the areas where you don't thrive. So my tip on that one is be honest, be truthful about how you are, because you would, if you make things up, you would be struggling in the interview because people would know that you are in direct conflict to what you said in the questionnaire. So that's step number two. If that goes through, then you are invited for a phone screen with usually the hiring manager. If not, if you are still not very convincing in your application, the recruiter may want to talk to you first and get some basic details about your motivation, your comp expectation, and stuff like that before introducing you to the hiring manager. it they're pretty fluid and it can go both ways. Sometimes the recruiter discussion actually happens, sometimes it is just an email exchange and then you directly talk to a hiring manager. um, with the hiring manager, they would look at so Amazon has these leadership principles, 16 leadership principles, and you can share a link with your audience. um, these leadership principles are at the core of how Amazon operates. And in the behavioral interviews, they are looking for people who demonstrate very strong examples of these leadership principles. So the hiring manager obviously will have a 30-minute, 45-minute conversation. In that 30, 45-minute conversation, they can't go over 16 leadership principles, but they usually pick up two to three leadership principles and they touch upon those in that introductory call. My favorite ones as a hiring manager at Amazon, I've done about 200 plus interviews. So my favorite ones have been ownership and customer obsession. And the reason I picked those two are because they're very broad. They're able to show that you are someone who is a problem solver, get things done, and is focused on the big picture. So it can all be subdued within ownership bucket. So I would usually go there. Customer obsession is at the core of Amazon. You have seen that Amazon was able to win a lot of market share over time because of providing superior customer service. So we do look for that kind of behavior in candidates we hire. Um, and then the hiring manager would do that 30, 45-minute interview or a phone screen. And then if the person qualifies and the hiring manager likes that person, they may directly move to a panel interview. Or in case like where the hiring manager was not able to get enough data points on the candidate, they will recommend them for additional phone screen. That phone screen would be done by another person from hiring manager's team. It might be one of the direct reports from the hiring manager, one of the eventual co-worker for the candidate, or it could be someone from a sister team just to get another perspective on the candidate. Same process, 30, 45-minute interview where that person would go over a couple of leadership principles, trying to get data points on the candidate. Usually in those, like after someone has done ownership, customer obsession, the next ones people probe on are deep dive. Or in case of senior roles, they would look for think big. So you could, for your audience, you can demarcate into two ways. Like someone who is applying for senior supply chain roles, they should really focus on think big and are right a lot. Those are the ones which are needed for supply chain leaders. For entry level and mid career, um, other leadership principles would work just fine. So after that second phone screen, if the second person is also convinced that you might be a good potential hire, Amazon would invite you for a panel interview, which usually is back to back 4 to 5 interviews. Um, 3 to 4 people of that panel would be from the same team or a sister team, or if you're one of your eventual coworkers. And then there is something called bar raiser. So this person is basically not from the same team you are applying for. And it would be someone from an outside group. So they may not even be from supply chain, and they might be taking interview of a supply chain person. And their focus is to make sure, one, to take out some of the bias which, like-minded people might have about, like, all the supply chain people might be looking at supply chain people a certain way. But this bar raiser is someone who is like from an outside world and is not really um, vested in, filling up a quota or filling up a position. So they would make sure that the person who we are hiring um, is like meeting the Amazon bar. And so you could expect that interview to be very focused in terms of leadership principle. And if there has been any kind of conflictory response you have given in your interview process, or you have given a point which the other interviewers were not comfortable with, the bar raiser might double down on probing you and making sure that they have enough data points to make a decision whether you have that thing as a strength or is that thing your weakness. um, so that's a pretty grueling process, because 4 5 back-to-back interviews which were super high energy and intensive can be very grueling. And hopefully when you have gone through it, um, then if you meet all the criteria, you have been able to, demonstrate that you're very strong on those leadership principles through the examples and the stories from your work experience you have been able to share. They will make a decision on whether to hire or not. And then after that, obviously, recruiting gets in touch and makes the offer, and the offer negotiation and all that does happen. One plug here, that there might be cases that by the time you have met the entire team, the candidate might choose that, hey, this is not the right role for me. And that's perfectly okay. Amazon encourages that if you don't think that that role is the best for you, you can let the recruiter know that, hey, I had a successful panel, but I don't want to do this role, but I'm looking a certain type of role. And it's good to articulate what you're looking for. So that recruiter, because they know that you have already gone through the whole process and you can be a good potential candidate, would plug you in with a team where they think that your skill set and your interest would match best. So it's always good to have a very good connection with the recruiter, because they usually would get on your side once they know that you have met the bar for Amazon.
Excellent. That's a very grueling and a very comprehensive process, I would say, Umair. Just maybe one reminder for my audience, because you did mention about AI bots being used to filter a lot of initial resumes. So just a reminder for all my audience, I've actually made a video on how you can get your resume, your supply chain resume, passed through AI bots, and you can watch that video by clicking over here. But on that whole process, I mean, one question I wanted to ask you, man, is the process is so grueling. And typically, when you order something from Amazon, you can sometimes get it on the same day or the next day. How long does this hiring process actually take typically?
So they have a promise now where I think it's now like 5 days for the entire process after your phone screen. So that's their goal usually. And in case the panel has happened, and sometimes, because of scheduling and all that, it might happen over several days. So whenever the last interview of that panel concluded, within 5 days, Amazon should come back with an answer to you.
Wow, that's really very impressive, because I do interviews all the time, and making that kind of a promise in a process where your panelists are sometimes in different time zones and different geographies is very difficult. So that I mean, considering how detailed the process is. 5 days seems to be a very optimistic goal, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about some of these, leadership principles you talked about. You talked about ownership. You talked about customer obsession, and I'm going to ask you a question because both you and I have worked with P&G before, and back in the day, P&G used to have something called the success drivers. How much of similarity or difference do you think are between these and the success drivers we had at P&G? I know this is a question which is a little bit off tangent to the Amazon process, but I think some of these are pretty interesting. Especially, I also want to come to the bar raiser one after you have given me the answer to this question. But tell me a little bit about, as you moved from a company like P&G into Amazon, and you got experience of interviewing with these leadership principles. What are some of the key differences you found?
Yeah, so I would think that there are like at least three or four which are widely, so there is about 60%, 70% overlap, and there are about three or four where I would say the P&G success drivers would not overlap with Amazon's. And the ones there which Amazon has different, one is frugality. So basically, we are looking for people who can get more done with less resources. For an ordinary person who would just read the definition of frugality would think that Amazon just wants to spend less money. It's not that. It's more about how do we achieve more with less, being very efficient about it. Um, so that's one. The second one, there is a leadership principle called earn trust, which is basically not only like your reputation building and building your equity, which overlaps with P&G, but the part which is different with earn trust is that you are very vocal about any gaps you had. And even if candidates tell us that, hey, while doing this particular project or activity or task, I had this deficiency, and that's okay. The Amazon hiring process would actually appreciate that you are calling out deficiency, and what is more important to us is that you are self-aware. So I think that's very different from Amazon, from P&G. The third one, I think, um, are right a lot, meaning that your how's your gut feeling about this stuff, right? Like how quickly can you put together a hypothesis and move forward versus trying to iron out all the details. And that is very important for Amazon speed, right? Like Amazon really values speed. They have to really come across with any market. They now play in so many segments that they have to really keep up their eye in terms of what's happening around them. You might have seen recently, Amazon launched Amazon Hall in direct competition to Timu and Sheen, right? So they really need to look for people who can make the hypothesis very quickly and move forward. um, so those are like some of the big ones which I would say there is one interesting one which is a very unique and peculiar to Amazon, that is have backbone, disagree, and commit, which is very different to P&G would think at that you would be agreeable, you would be very collaborative in driving consensus, while Amazon has this one where it is like have backbone, meaning that even if you are an entry level employee, you are encouraged to be in disagreement with a director or a VP, but based on facts and data. And that's encouraged. And I actually struggled with that in my first few months because I just couldn't internalize that culture after spending about 11 years at P&G, moving to Amazon. And then other one is there would be a decision being like within that have backbone, disagree, and commit. The other part of it is there might be some decision being made which I don't agree with. I tried my best. I gave my reasoning on why I disagree with it. But let's say the consensus among the team was that they will still go ahead with it. Now I'm expected to commit to it, right? Even though I initially disagreed. So, hey, Umair, you voiced your concerns. We noted it. We have made some tweaks to the plan, but we are still going to go ahead. And now I would be on that page where I'm committed to actually delivering that project, even though I was initially hesitant or resistant towards the direction we were taking. So that really helps in shaping Amazon strategies and approach versus like everyone trying to drive consensus. And again, I will talk about speed. That really helps Amazon to move quickly, even though there were some contradictory opinions and there were some people who were not fully on board. But because of the leadership principle, Amazon is encouraging their employees to commit to the decision after the consensus has been reached, minus you.
Wow, that's really nice. Very, very impressive. And I think some of these kind of underpin the required behaviors that allow an Amazon to take faster decisions and move more robustly and quickly, because they are in that space where they are kind of trailblazing in a lot of cases, right? So they are creating new ways of how we can deliver better service to customers and so on, which is amazing. And I think one thing I want to touch on, Mary, you talked about is the importance of self awareness and accepting your weaknesses. And this is something which I coach my clients a lot on, that sometimes it's okay for you to openly talk about your weakness, because a lot of times, the way corporate culture has evolved over so many years is that whole there is a lot of stigma around talking openly about your weakness. But I think
Yep,
that is now, thanks to companies like Amazon, because they're trying to break that stigma. It's okay for you to talk about your weakness, especially in supply chain, because it's such a dynamic industry that we all have weaknesses and we all will make mistakes in life. And the most important thing in a job interview is not to hide your mistakes, but what did you learn from that mistake, and how does that mistake teach you to improve? And by the way, on that topic also, I made some time ago a video on how to improve your self awareness, which I'm going to put a link over here as well. And one more leadership principle I want to come back to, and especially I'm going to do that because this is the Amazon process we are talking about. Because Amazon, is basically, they officially call themselves this, and they are, in my opinion, because I'm an Amazon customer myself, they are truly the world's most customer centric company. I think I don't exactly remember the slogan. I saw it when I went on an Amazon tour a few years ago. I think they claim to be the Earth's most customer centric company, if I'm not mistaken, right? And you
yep,
mentioned customer obsession, and because we are talking about supply chain jobs, how important is customer obsession in an Amazon job interview? Is it an invariable question that one can expect,
absolutely.
or it's something which is optional and people can ignore it?
You might get away from not getting that question in your phone screens, but definitely in your panel you will get it. And even if you are in a role which is not expected to be in front of the customers, but you will still get that question. And the reason for that is because that gives the meaning to all the processes or any tasks you are doing, right? Like how do you influencing our customers? How are you making it better for our customers? So even if you're a supply chain person who is more focused in terms of like let's say maintenance of equipment and that word person would still be expected. Like the customer for that person might be internal stakeholders. So definitely you will get that in your panel, if not the phone screen. And as I said, like my personal favorites, it's among there. So I usually in my phone screen will ask something about customer obsession.
That's excellent. And I mean, I'm glad you mentioned things like, even if you are not in a direct customer role, but still, this is such an important competency to have, right? I mean, I want to go back to the famous example where I think it was probably Lyndon Johnson, the US president, when he went to see one of the NASA facilities when they were trying to put a man on the moon. He asked the question to the janitor that, what are you doing? And the janitor actually responded, although he was cleaning the floor, and he said that I'm trying to put a man on the moon, right? So that's the clarity of purpose. And that's one of the things I really liked about visiting an Amazon warehouse a few
Yeah,
years ago, because that whole customer centricity was really kind of visible as I walked through the different areas of the warehouse. So that was really fantastic. Let's move to my next question here, Omer, which is, tell me a little bit about, like, what are the different types of supply chain jobs which are available at Amazon? Because I'm sure that the most commonly publicized jobs, or the like largest number of jobs, are basically operational jobs, right? Where you are
yeah,
going and helping with the packaging, doing like all those like shift related roles. But
yeah.
those are probably the entry level jobs, right? So just give me a breakdown on like what kind of entry level jobs exist in Amazon, and then what are the type of senior level jobs one can expect in supply chain, and then what are
Yeah.
some of the senior leader positions?
Yeah. So Amazon, it's unfair to think that Amazon is one company. Amazon probably has 350,000 plus corporate employees, and total strength is about 1.5 million if you include all the people who work in our fulfillment centers. So if you look at that spectrum, so Amazon supply chain, I might have to send you a link of the landing page, which probably lists about 10 to 12 different job types. The more common ones, which I will touch upon, like in terms of like concentration of highest number of jobs. One is obviously operations at a fulfillment center or managing our last mile network, last mile, middle mile network, right? So, in both jobs give a lot of flexibility. The operations job at a fulfillment center would mean that you are based out of a fulfillment center. It could be anywhere. It could be a remote city. It could be major city, either in US, Canada, or anywhere in the world you are looking for, or where Amazon is present. So greater location flexibility. However, you because you are working at a fulfillment center, you are not directly connected to the corporate environment anymore because your office and your entire life is based at that fulfillment center. Obviously, you will get the opportunities to move to a corporate role, do something else once you have mastered the fulfillment center, or some people really like it and they spend entire career at a fulfillment center. So that's one. The second portion is, how do you manage that network from corporate offices? So that could be New York, Toronto, Seattle. Those are like some of the hub cities there. uh, the hub cities might differ by job functions. So certain job functions may have a different hub. So the supply chain hubs most likely for, like for middle mile or last mile jobs are Seattle, New York, Toronto, if you're looking for Canada. Um, and those are the ones who are basically looking at like how does the fulfillment operations work, and at a corporate level how do we strategize in terms of like where do we need to put more fulfillment centers, where do we need to put more drivers or vehicles or receiving facilities, etc., etc. So that all is being done there. Then there is a third group which is basically looking at all the planning, and this is where your the candidates from supply planning, demand management, they will find it the most relevant. And you might find some of the S&OP cycle work being done, um, but very heavy on forecasting. Excuse me. And when I'm talking forecasting, think about that, let's say Black Friday or Cyber Monday on those kind of sales, that forecasting, the scale of that forecasting has to be so good because it's going to be a make or break day for Amazon, right? If you under forecast, you left a lot of money on the table. If you over forecast, you will be left with a lot of stuck resources, and our fulfillment centers would be overflowing with inventory. So hats off, like, to the folks who manage it. Like, it's a very a lot of data analytics is being used in that function, and a lot of supply chain experts have actually become data experts too because they want to be very good at forecasting and planning for it. Promise. So a big canvas of jobs available. So for the right candidate, it won't be hard to find a role. And the the beauty of Amazon is that they are like in other companies I've worked at, like for example P&G. Your career is jointly owned between you and your boss and your HR, and they really plan for your next role. At Amazon, no one plans your next role other than you. So that's a huge difference. You might come in for a supply chain role, and then you might find your calling in something else, and you might transition off to something else. And Amazon is totally supportive of that.
Mhm. That's very interesting. And by the way, that is very similar to what Mars is because I had that cultural switch as well when I moved from PNG to Mars. Because in PNG, like you said, your career is kind of co-owned by a number of different stakeholders. Mars doesn't have any of that because Mars is basically a conglomerate of a lot of different acquisitions over time. So one of the basic philosophies of career building in Mars is that your career is entirely your responsibility. So you have to do the networking, you have to find the right job for your next best move. Yes, you need support of your line manager, you need to do a lot of networking and all of that. But then at the end of the day, you are the one who is basically steering that ship, and then you have to make sure that you have the right people who will provide the right level of tailwinds for you to get where you want to. Now, one thing which you mentioned, and this is my favorite topic in supply chain because I've spent most of my life in planning, Umair. So I want to just go a little bit deeper into that. First of all, thanks for mentioning demand planning and forecasting, because I just made a recent video on the top five most highly demanded supply chain jobs in 2025. And I have deliberately put demand planning jobs there because even with the advancement in AI that we have been experiencing over the last couple of years or so, demand planning, more than a science, is an art, right? Because you need to drive consensus, you need to do a lot of that gut feeling, especially when you're doing promotions like Black Friday and all of that. So yes, AI can be a huge enabler, but at the end of the day, that is a skill which is always high in demand. But one question I wanted to ask you on planning jobs, Umair, is that does Amazon like to hire people from a similar industry? Let's say if somebody is coming in planning, is there a preference for, let's say, somebody who has already worked at a Chewy or at another like e-commerce retailer, or are they also okay to take talent from manufacturing organizations like Procter, like Mars, like Pepsi, and so on?
Yeah, I think generally they are looking for that diversity of experience versus just getting the people who have just been doing that particular thing. And I'll again mention my own example. I used to manage sales and supply chain. I was a category leader for household care products for Procter and Gamble, selling to Target, and they hired me to manage vendor management folks for home entertainment business. So entirely different industry, different set of products, and I was sitting on the other side of the table. So instead of me pushing the stuff to Target, now I'm buying on behalf of Amazon to sell on Amazon.com. Um, so you would see more example of Amazon looking for people from diverse set of industries versus like just the subject matter specialist. Um, and while I won't say that subject matter specialists will struggle. I think they will not struggle, but I would encourage people who are not from that similar background yet that they can still apply. And they could apply, and they can most, if with the right level of preparation and right level of demonstration of your own skill set, you may be able to convince the hiring panel that you are a great fit for them.
As we get to the end of this podcast, Mayor, what is one advice you would like to give to the candidates who are applying for a job at Amazon?
I have lots of advices. I'll try to be
You
as
can do more
concise
than
as
one.
possible. Okay, sure. So first and foremost, your resume. Please, please, please customize your resume to the job you're applying for. Second, in your resume, please call out the impact of the work you did. So leading a team of 5 people doesn't mean anything. What did that team accomplish? Include that. Or you transformed the supply chain cycle. That's pretty arbitrary. You have to put in some data to validate what that transformation actually delivered. So, and lastly, like I know a lot of services are out there in terms of like building your resume, leveraging AI, etc., etc. But always the human gut check in terms of like how this truly reflects who you are, and would this stand out if someone was going to actually read it. With that level of preparation, you should be able to get that invite to participate in the hiring cycle. um, I had one more thought with regards to like the interview process itself. So one difference versus like the established methodologies which people would know, and this is my advice to anyone who I have encouraged to apply at Amazon. So star model is very well known. I have a slight twist to it, and I call it START model. And the last T stands for takeaway. The reason I could say that is because the interviewer is trying to capture whatever details the candidate is sharing, and they're trying to take a note of it. And now with AI, there are lots of transcribing services they're using, but they may in hearing your example or your answer, they may get a little lost in terms of like what did you truly accomplish or what you truly delivered. So I recommend everyone to close their answer with takeaway, just to wrap it up, just to summarize. So here was the situation, I delivered this, here is the impact of what actions I took. So that's one tip for your candidates. And then my last one, I would say, um, almost every recruiter or everyone on the panel would ask, and especially the hiring manager would ask, hey, what questions do you have for me?
Mhm.
And don't think that the interview is over. You really have to show your mettle in responding to that question. Good candidates would have come in very well prepared to ask some very intelligent questions. And they are, while they are asking a question, but they are demonstrating that they are truly motivated about the role. They have done a very good amount of research. And three, they are just demonstrating their natural curiosity about how the team operates or how the things are at Amazon. So put in a lot of effort to think through those questions and have a set of questions to ask, so that, like, you don't have to repeat the same question with everyone in the panel. You can ask different questions, and you can customize a little bit. Sometimes you would get LinkedIn profile of people who are going to interview you in advance. You may want to do a little bit of research on them and then think, okay, what are the right or relevant questions to ask this particular person? Like, let's say there is someone who is 12 years at Amazon, you may ask a cultural question about
Mhm.
Amazon from that person, right? And then there might be some person like who's the hiring manager, and you know that. So you may want to ask, what are the top challenges or problems you are solving, and how do you think about this particular space you are operating in? That will give you a lot of understanding about the role you are applying for. Plus, at the same time, you're getting the benefit of like people thinking, oh, this person is asking the right questions,
Mhm.
so this would be a wonderful addition to our team. So that question of yours basically helped sway the hiring decision in your favor.
Excellent, excellent. So there are such amazing points, and I'm really enjoying this conversation, Umar, because you're almost doing like free marketing for a lot of content that I post on my channel, right? So, for example, you talked about customizing your resume when you apply for the job and call out the impact. And I made a video some time ago which is called the do's and don'ts of CV writing, and I've covered both those points here. Once again, I'm going to put the link there. The other point you mentioned was about the start model. I really like that addition in the end. In fact, I should probably make some videos on that because I talk a lot about the star model. And then lastly, even in my all my videos where I've talked about like specific jobs, whether it's a warehouse manager job or the customer supply chain manager job and so on, I have put like a bonus section at the end of each of those videos where I've talked about what are the questions you should prepare, because that's where the candidates spend the least time on. And that's where, like Umair kind of shared the Amazon example himself, that how the quality of those questions you ask can make or break your interview as well at times. So
Yeah,
I think that's such an
absolutely.
important thing to keep in mind. Last question for you, Umair. What, and this is something which, by the way, I asked every experienced professional I invite on my channel, because I think it's a great way to get some $1 million tips or from like some key nuggets of information from someone as experienced as you are, which is, what is the one advice you would want to give to your 25-year-old self?
So the tip I would, and I regret someone didn't give it to me, but the number one tip I would give to my 25-year-old self is get out of your comfort zone. I was very myopic. I got a very comfortable job. By the time I was 25, I thought like, oh, I have a great career ahead, and I stopped trying, and that probably slowed me down. If I had not slowed down at that time, I probably would have accomplished more. So I think don't get comfortable too early. Keep the learning process going. Focus on skill acquisition, because that value addition to yourself would always pay off.
Absolutely. That's great. Anything, an important reminder for all the viewers is that one of the key skills, and I know we have talked about a lot of skills in this video, we've talked about self-awareness, we have talked about leadership principles, but almost like a non-negotiable skill nowadays is lifelong learning, because the technology and the tools you are working on today they may or may not exist in 5 years from now, right?
Mhm.
And supply chain is no exception to that, because supply chain increasingly is becoming more and more technology dependent. So that whole idea of continuing to learn new skills, new systems, new ways of doing things, and more smarter ways of doing things is something which will always help you thrive in the world of supply chain.
Yeah.
So I think on that note, where we'll come to the end of this podcast. Really, thanks a lot for taking the time out. I know we are kind of very close to the end of the year. I'm sure you must be preparing for your holiday. So really appreciate your effort to take the time out and come on my podcast. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me over.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Omer. Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye bye.